Okay, today guys, we're going to work on solving multi-step inequalities. So we've talked about so far using these organizers will kind of help us. So I'm going to start filling out an organizer with you. Again, solving these multi-stepped inequalities that we're going to be doing, I'm going to split it into two pieces. So actually the multi-step stuff that we're going to do, we're just going to go through part one today. Try to get that back in your memory a little bit. So in the center, go ahead and get it labeled. So we're gonna put solving multi-step inequalities. And I'm just gonna call this part one. Now with this foldable, we're only going to use the 5 sections that are on the front. That's it. Okay, now remember, it doesn't matter really where you start on these. Just start with one wherever you're going to start and then work your way around. Okay, so I'm going to start with the first one, and I really just want to, for a second, get some reminders back in your memory. So remember, if we're going to talk about inequalities, that if we multiply or divide by a negative number, we have to flip our inequality. That's one piece. And that's really about a reminder about solving, really. Also, if I were going to graph any of these for any of the graphing, when we talk about inequalities, if I have a less than or greater than and I'm graphing it, that means I'm going to have an open circle. And if it has an equal to with it, so less than or equal to or greater than or equal to, then I'm going to have a filled in or a solid circle. Now, those are just some reminders of things that we've done before, and maybe we just haven't done them in a while. I just want to make sure they're back in your memory to kind of help yourself out. Now, the rest of these, I'm going to write on them maybe a little bit more differently than I did on the last one. So if this were my section right here, and I'm going to show you this just so I can turn it a little bit. I'm going to turn my paper a little bit like that. See how if I do that, I almost have a longer part here? It might give me a little bit more room to solve because some of these are a little bit longer than others. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. I've gone to the next spot. I'm going to label this A. And I have 7, parentheses, x minus 3. Plus 9 is greater than or equal to 37. So now we've got the whole kit and caboodle with this one. We have parentheses, which is going to be bringing back some distributive property ideas, and we are going to have to solve. So our first step in this one is to take this 7 and distribute it. And remember, when I distribute, that means multiply. So if I do 7 times x is going to be 7x. 7 times negative 3 is negative 21. And then I'm going to bring the rest of the problem down. I hope you're kind of seeing the reason that I've turned directions on the foldable, only to make sure that you have a good idea of how that should be set up. Now I'm going to work on getting some things together. So first of all, these two are on the same side. So negative 21 plus 9 is going to be negative 12. So I'm going to do minus 12. I'm going to bring down the 37. Now this looks kind of like the equation ones we were doing before. So now we're just going to work to get x by itself. So let's get rid of this first. The opposite of subtracting 12 is adding 12. Remember, whatever you do to one side, you do to the other. So those cancel, and I'm left with 7x. Oops. And then 37 plus 12 is 49. Then divide both sides by 7. Get x is greater than or equal to 7. So there's my inequality. The problem is, though, remember how we talked a little bit about graphing? So let's talk about this one. So if I were going to graph, the only number they care about here is 7. So I know 7's got to be on there. Now, I could do more numbers after this or before this, but I know 7's got to be on there. With this inequality, it has an equal to underneath it, which means at 7, it's going to be a filled-in circle. And it wants to know where the values of x are greater than 7. So the ones greater than 7 would have to be on this side. A good key to remember is that if the variable comes first, this is really going to point the way the line's going once it's solved and the variable is by itself. So just so you have an idea of how to set up the graph and be able to solve for it. Okay, let's move to the next one. And again, I'm going to take that sheet and I'm going to turn it a little bit sideways, just like the last one, so I have a little bit more room to solve. And this one for B is going to be 2 parentheses negative x plus 4 minus 3x is less than 43. Now, two things. Where this negative is at, there's no number there. Remember how we've always talked about that we assume that that's a 1 there. So we know that that's going to be negative 1. Now I need to distribute this to both values. So 2 times negative 1x is negative 2x. 2 times positive 4 is positive 8. Bring the rest down. And now I've got to use my skills to be able to get stuff together. So these two are on the same side. So negative 2x minus 3x is negative 5x. And I'm going to bring the rest of these down. And now this is just like the last one. I'm going to go through and get x by itself. So I'm going to work on getting rid of this. So the opposite of adding 8 is subtracting 8. So those cancel. Left with negative 5x and positive 35. Now, to get x by itself, I'm going to have to divide by negative 5. Now, this is a spot where I'm going to have to flip my inequality sign because I just divided by a negative number. So that means that if this one is less than, it's going to become greater than. These cancel, and I'm left with x. And 35 divided by negative 5 is negative 7. So here is my final inequality. So if I were going to graph this, negative 7 is the only number they care about. So I'm going to do negative 7. Now, I gladly could do more numbers after it or before it, but I know that's got to be there because of what it says. So this inequality right here does not have an equal to with it. So that means it's going to be an open circle. And it wants to know where the values are that are bigger than negative 7. So that would be on this side. So my line would go that way. Okay, so far so good. We've got a couple there. Let's go to C now. Again, don't be afraid to go through these and stop so that you can write them down, because that's going to be something that's going to be important. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing I did in the last one. I'm just going to turn this a little bit, if I can get the side of it here. There we go. See how I've done this now so that when I go to write, I've got a little bit more room here and a little bit further to solve. So the next one that I'm going to is D. So D is 5x minus 8x minus 4 is less than or equal to negative 4 plus 3x. So now, good news, no parentheses that I have to deal with. So I'm going to start trying to put some things together. So I have these two that are alike. So positive 5x minus 8x is negative 3x. And I'm going to bring everything down. Now, what does seem different about this problem is that I actually have variables on both sides. So I'm going to, on this one, you can solve it more than one way. I'm going to try to get my variables on this side and my numbers on another, just to make it so it's easier for you. So I'm going to move this. So the opposite of positive 3x is negative 3x. So I have negative 6x minus 4 is less than or equal to negative 4, and then those cancel. Now I'm going to try to get x alone. So I'm going to go here. The opposite of subtracting 4 is adding 4. So negative 6x is less than or equal to 0. Now, to get x by itself, I'm going to have to divide by negative 6. So I just multiplied or divided by a negative number. That means I'm going to have to flip my inequality. So I have to flip my sign. So if this one is less than or equal to, I'm going to do greater than or equal to. This will cancel out, be left with x. 0 divided by negative 6 is going to be 0. So that's my final inequality. If I were going to graph that, 0 is the only number they care about, so I'm going to put a 0 here. Because the inequality has an equal to with it, it's a filled in or a solid circle, and they want to know where the x's are greater than or equal to 0, which would be on this side. Okay, so first of all, now if I were to look back, I should have my center filled in, I should have a remind piece, and then I should have 4 problems that are filled out A through D. Okay, we'll do a little bit more with part 2 later.